What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through some must-add waiver wire targets before week 1 of the fantasy football season. So guys, I'd be thinking about adding to your roster, or if you're already pretty content with the roster you have now, just guys to be aware of, to keep your eye on after week 1 and throughout the rest of the season. I'm going to go through every single position, so running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, and then also some streaming defense options. If you guys enjoy the video, hit that like button and subscribe. And let's just dive right into it. We're going to start off with the running back position. And the first running back I want to talk about here is Rico Dowdle. He's currently rostered in about a third of leagues. The cutoff I did 40% rostered or less on ESPN. So Rico Dowdle rostered in 33.3% of leagues. And it's kind of crazy that the potential running back one for the Cowboys could just be sitting out there on waivers. The Cowboys were the highest scoring offense last year. Rico Dowdle is competing with a washed Ezekiel Elliott and a washed Dalvin Cook. I'm not making the argument that Rico Dowdle is some sort of stud, but I would rather go after like the younger, more unproven option than the veterans who've already kind of proven their way out of their prime. McCarthy's come out. He said that Rico Dowdle is going to play less on special teams. He's talked about how he is a 3-down back, good in pass pro. I like Rico Dowdle as a pickup. Just the fact that you could get a potential running back one for one of the better offenses for free, I think he's definitely a very strong pickup. Now, the next running back is going to be Jalen Wright. He's rostered in 22.6% of leagues, and he probably is the best handcuff that you're going to find on your waiver wire. He's the current running back 3 on the Dolphins behind Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, but he kind of has the unique upside of being a double-headed handcuff, where normally the handcuff is the running back 2 behind like the clear running back 1. But the Dolphins have a very unique backfield situation where they supported 2 top 5 running backs in fantasy points per game last year. So really an injury to Achane or Mostert could open things up and make Jalen Wright a fantasy relevant option. We're going to continue talking about a lot of the rookies in this running back class. The next one is going to be Marshawn Lloyd. He's rostered in 28.6% of leagues, and he was someone that I was really interested in earlier on in the offseason. Then he started having some injury issues. I kind of cooled off a little bit, but I'm pretty much all the way back in here. He dealt with a hamstring strain, missed some of the preseason, missed some in training camp, but he's back at practice. A.J. Dillon is out for the season, which completely opens up the running back 2 role for Marshawn Lloyd. So I feel like worst case scenario, he's probably a pretty valuable handcuff just playing behind Josh Jacobs. But I also think he has the upside to push for a committee. I know people don't like to hear this. They love Josh Jacobs. But Josh Jacobs was rough last year. He signed a 4-year contract with the Packers, but they have an out after 1 year. And so if Josh Jacobs does not bounce back, I think Marshawn Lloyd, they spent a day 2 pick on him. They clearly like him. I really do think he can work his way into this backfield. And LaFleur also has liked to use a committee in the past. We saw it with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. We also saw when he was the offensive coordinator for the Titans for a year, he had a pretty strong committee between Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. And like Derrick Henry was by far the more efficient option, and he was still giving Dion Lewis a decent chunk of the carries. So I think Marshawn Lloyd's interesting, could push for a committee, but then also has that, just handcuff floor. Another rookie from this class, Kamani Vidal, is rostered in 4.1% of leagues. He was someone who was kind of getting a lot of hype, especially from the dynasty community after the draft, just based on the potential upside he had and, the opportunity to earn a role here for the Chargers. Then there was an article put out, I think it was from The Athletic, where they were predicting that he was not going to make the roster. Then people started to, fade him, but he made the roster. He's looking good. He's competing with, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins coming off a torn Achilles. Like Gus Edwards, solid running back, but definitely not like a bona fide running back 1. Dobbins is great when healthy, but he's already torn his ACL, coming off a torn Achilles. There's no guarantee he's the same player. So looking at Kamani Vidal, he was a day 3 pick, 5'8", 213 pounds, really impressive athletic testing. He caught a lot of passes in college, so he's definitely a capable receiving back. He's really good in pass protection. I just think looking at this Chargers offense, the competition isn't great. And I do think he's going to have an opportunity to earn a role here with the Chargers at some point throughout the season. Continuing talking about these rookies, we have Ray Davis, who's rostered in 13.8% of leagues. And at this point, we're kind of just getting into the handcuffs, guys who could definitely benefit from their starter going down. And Ray Davis at this point is the clear James Cook handcuff. I think he also has the upside to get some usage, in the red zone, on the goal line. I don't know if that would be enough to have him be fantasy relevant if James Cook is healthy, but something where he could at least look to expand his role a little bit. But if James Cook goes down, Ray Davis is honestly probably a top 12 running back in fantasy week to week. Another handcuff here with Jordan Mason, rostered in just under 15% of leagues. With Elijah Mitchell out for the season, he should be the clear-cut CMC handcuff. McCaffrey goes down, Jordan Mason definitely becomes a very relevant option. Also from this rookie class, like some of the other running backs I've talked about, Bucky Irving rostered in 12.4% of leagues. I feel like at this point, he is the pretty clear Rachaad White handcuff. And I know a lot of people like Rachaad White. I do think Bucky Irving has the opportunity to kind of force a committee here, especially if Rachaad White doesn't pick up on his efficiency. Bucky Irving is at least, a fresh face in that backfield, someone who could earn a role. Then we have Tyrone Tracy, another rookie here, rostered in just under 10% of leagues. I think at this point, he is probably the Devin Singletary handcuff, but I also think he has some committee upside. Not sure what exactly that's going to do in this Giants backfield, but Singletary, not necessarily a world beater. Tyrone Tracy could come in, earn a solid role. Singletary goes down. He's definitely playable. We have Tank Bigsby, who is the clear-cut Travis Etienne handcuff, rostered in 4.8% of leagues. Was really rough last year, but has looked a lot better in the preseason, in training camp. He's getting much better reports. And then the final guy here, Braylon Allen, rostered in 8% of leagues, looks to be the most likely favorite to be the Breece Hall handcuff. So that's the running back position. Now, pivoting over to 5 of my must-add wide receivers, I want to start off with 2 of the Packers wide receivers. And I was honestly shocked to see that Romeo Doubs was only rostered in 35.6% of leagues. You also had Dontavian Wicks rostered in only 19.4%. And I think both these guys are pretty interesting. I feel like most would agree that this is probably going to be a pretty good Packers passing attack. But then you look at the wide receivers, and it feels like they're going to be rolling out some sort of committee. Like, can anyone with full confidence say they know which guy's going to finish as the wide receiver 1? Maybe it's Jaden Reed. He was the best option last year, but Christian Watson has definitely shown flashes. He's probably had the highest ceiling of those options. You have Romeo Doubs, who's just been a pretty steady presence. And then you have Dontavian Wicks, who impressed last year as a rookie. So I'm fine just throwing darts or, getting waiver wire pickups on, the wide receiver 3 and 4 in this offense. For Romeo Doubs, I do think it's pretty likely that he's going to be in there on 2 wide receiver sets with Christian Watson, coming off his second season where he averaged 10.3 points per game. And then for Dontavian Wicks, he's probably more of a wide receiver handcuff, which is pretty rare, but he can play out wide. He can play in the slot. I think if any of these top 3 go down, he definitely could become relevant. Was very efficient as a rookie. He was 11th in yards per target, 24th in yards per reception. So I want pieces of this Packers offense. And if you can get them for pretty much free, I think they're definitely interesting options. Then we have Xavier Legette, a rookie from this year's class, rostered in 32.8% of leagues. He's a freak athlete, 6'1", 220, tested incredibly well. And I think he has a legit shot to be the number 2 weapon here on an improved Panthers offense. He was definitely a later breakout guy, but when he did break out, he was very dominant in his final college season. So I just think if you're getting a rookie wide receiver just straight up off of waivers at this point, I think it's a solid pickup. And then another rookie wide receiver, Jalen Polk, is rostered in 26.5% of leagues, and he was an early round 2 in this year's draft, went to the Patriots, and he just has the upside of being in a wide open wide receiver room. You have some veterans that aren't overly impressive. You have some other younger wide receivers, Demario Douglas, Javon Baker, but Polk could definitely just straight up end up being the number 1 target. And you also have the upside of Drake May just straight up being really good as a rookie. No one knew CJ Stroud was going to go in last year and absolutely ball out. Drake May could take over the starting job early on in the year, play really well, Polk breaks out, and then you have a decent upside wide receiver that's just sitting on waivers. And then my final waiver wire pickup is going to be Joshua Palmer. He's rostered in 33.6% of leagues, and I'm honestly not the biggest Joshua Palmer fan. I like Ladd McConkey. I think he's the much better option. But even I can admit that Josh Palmer should not be sitting on waivers. Ladd McConkey was not in on the 2 wide receiver sets in the preseason. Joshua Palmer could very easily be Herbert's number 1 target, especially early on in the season. So worth a pickup. We're not quite sure what this Chargers offense is going to look like, but they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Fine picking up these pieces if they are free. Now looking at the quarterback position, I just have 2 guys here. The first one's Matthew Stafford, rostered in 32.8% of leagues. He's just proven to be a very, very good quarterback. And then he has 2 elite wide receivers with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. I don't think he's someone who should be sitting on waivers for an injury or a bye week. I think if people are rostering a second quarterback, maybe, they wait at the position, Their quarterback one is like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Tua, Goff. I think Matthew Stafford is a very solid quarterback two to have. And then the other guy here is Justin Fields, rostered only 4.1% of leagues. And I think out of all the quarterbacks on waivers, Justin Fields has by far the most upside. He's obviously not going to be the week one starter. That's Russ. But if Russ struggles, which I think is fairly likely, the Steelers could definitely turn to Fields. We know he has that elite rushing upside. Very few, if any, quarterbacks can match Justin Fields' rushing ceiling. So I think the offense is not going to be great, but Fields can overcome it. We saw it with the Bears, at least fantasy-wise. So if, Russ starts to struggle, definitely could be worth adding Justin Fields if you want some upside at the quarterback position. Obviously, there are going to be guys like Baker, Geno who are available, but at this point, right, we're not getting bye weeks within the next couple of weeks. Injuries haven't occurred. I don't think there's any urgency to add players like that. Now, looking at the tight end position, I feel like this year is interesting for tight end because I think there's a lot of depth when we're looking at the high end to mid tier options. There's a lot of quality tight end picks. But once you're getting outside like the top 12, 13, the position feels very gross. But I think there, is some upside for some guys to emerge and be quality waiver wire pickups. So I'm just going to run through, I think, like 7 names here of guys who could be fantasy relevant. And one thing I'm looking for with these tight ends, I'm looking for guys who could be top 2 target earners on their offense. I don't want to be the guy that's starting a tight end, just like praying they get into the end zone. I want someone who can command some volume, have a fairly high weekly floor. And so these are some of those names. Hunter Henry, rostered in 10.3% of leagues. This is a wide receiver room filled with kind of rough veteran options, unproven younger players like I talked about with Jalen Polk. Hunter Henry is an established option, could definitely be a top target earner for the Patriots. Then we have Tyler Conklin, rostered in 36.1% of leagues. You obviously have Garrett Wilson as their clear-cut wide receiver one, but the rest of those wide receivers are pretty questionable. Mike Williams is probably their number 2, but he's getting up there in age, coming off a torn ACL. I think Tyler Conklin could definitely, command his fair share of targets with Aaron Rodgers. Then we have Luke Musgrave with the Packers, rostered in 8.1% of leagues. And I think the risk here is obviously that just like the wide receiver position, the Packers run like a tight end by committee with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. But they did like Musgrave as their tight end one last year. He was a round 2 pick, good athlete, decent college production. And I think Tucker Kraft is also coming off a torn pec this offseason. So maybe Musgrave, gets the bulk of the opportunities early on and can kind of cement that tight end one spot. Also rostered in 8.1% of leagues, we have Noah Fant. And I think people have kind of forgotten that before Noah Fant was traded to the Seahawks, he was a back-end tight end 1 in points per game in back-to-back seasons. He was tight end 11, tight end 12. The Seattle offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, loved using a tight end by committee. So we definitely saw Noah Fant's production completely fall off. He was no longer fantasy relevant. But I think he could definitely be an interesting option under the new coaching staff here in Seattle. So Noah Fant, someone where if week 1 we see a solid route participation, someone I'd definitely be looking to add. And then someone like, I guess, the more upside guys, at least these next 2, I really like Ben Sinnott, rostered in 6.9% of leagues. He checks most of the boxes you'd be looking for in a high upside elite tight end. He was a round 2 pick, really good athlete, has a strong college receiving production profile. So I think he's definitely someone who could break out in year 1. Maybe he's playing alongside or behind Zach Ertz early on in the season, but we saw a guy like Trey McBride, who's clearly talented, kind of sit behind Zach Ertz. He took over in the second half and completely dominated. I think Benson, it's interesting. And also behind Terry, there's just not a ton going on there in terms of their pass catchers. So also has that top 2 target earner upside. Then we have Greg Dulcich, rostered in only 1.1% of leagues. So it's pretty much guaranteed he's on waivers. I really think there are 2 things Greg Dulcich needs, and he's going to ball out. The first one is playing time. He needs a solid route participation. He needs to be on the field, right? This isn't going to be an elite Broncos offense, so he's going to need to have the pretty clear tight end 1 role. The other thing that he really needs is just healthy hamstrings. Those have really limited his production ever since his rookie season. He missed the first, 5 games of his rookie year with a hamstring injury. He played really well once he got in as a rookie, on a bad offense. Really impressed, but then his season ended with hamstring injuries. And then I think he only played in 2 games last year because of, once again, hamstring issues. He has missed 22 games in his first 2 NFL seasons. So health is a concern, but if he can just stay healthy and, Sean Payton's throwing him out there, getting him good usage, I really do think Greg Dulcich could be startable for fantasy. And then we have Colby Parkinson, also rostered in 1.1% of leagues. And with Tyler Higbee injured, the Rams like to use their tight ends. They like to give him solid route participation. Higbee is someone who has been fantasy relevant. So I think Colby Parkinson could step in, definitely be playable, at least like a streaming option, bye weeks, injuries. Kind of similar with what I talked about with Noah Fant with that tight end by committee. Colby Parkinson was in that same thing last year with the Seahawks. So in a new situation, could definitely be an interesting option. And then the final position here, defenses. I'm definitely in the camp of just streaming defenses week to week. I don't reach to grab a top one. I'm just going to go on waivers, pick the best matchup every single week. So for week one, these are, I think, some of the best options that are available. We have the Seahawks, who are rostered in just under 40% of leagues, just barely made the cut for this video, but they're going up against the Broncos. Rookie quarterback, not a super talented offense, solid matchup week one. Then we have the Vikings, rostered in 19% of leagues. Obviously, the Giants, not a good offense. Definitely, a situation we're probably going to target a lot with these waiver wire videos. Then we have the Bears, rostered in 34.6% of leagues. I just think the Bears are a straight up good defense, and they're also going up against the Titans, who might have some upside. They've made some moves this offseason, but an unproven Will Levis, fairly unproven offense overall. So I think the Bears are a solid week one option. We have the Falcons, rostered in 14.2% of leagues. They have a nice matchup against the Steelers. And then the Buccaneers, only rostered in 4.2% of leagues, but once again, kind of trying to target those rookies, the unproven offenses. I think that is what the Commanders are. But that is going to wrap it up for all my top waiver wire targets. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any fantasy questions, you want to know if you should drop this player for this player, start sits, just drop them down below, and I'll make sure to get back to every single person. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.